Good morning. Freiliche Erev Chanukah. Okay. Ready to thrust ourselves into this HaReshimu. We're in Ayin Beis, volume 3. We're still on page 1269, trying to really fully understand as much as possible the Rebbe Rashab's in-depth explanation of the HaReshimu, which I can tell you from all the places of Chassidus it talks about it, as I've explained in the previous classes, the HaReshimu is one of the most obvious themes and topics and concepts that you literally see its evolution from the Arizal through all the Rabbeim of Chassidus, each one adding something to it. And the Rebbe Rashab here clearly is bringing it to, I would say, a conclusion, but definitely to a very definitive understanding of the HaReshimu on many different angles of it. And frankly, when you learn it first in the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim, and then the Mittler Rebbe, with Alter Rebbe, and it doesn't, you don't understand it quite this way. Not that there's a contradiction, God forbid. It's just that the Alter Rebbe spoke about it primarily one aspect of it, HaReshimu, as in its so-called the afterglow, if you wish, the impression that remains after the Tzimtzum from before the Tzimtzum. But based on the Torah Erin Noyach, that the Alter Rebbe says that the HaReshimu Keileles HaSakoil, that it encompasses everything is with the Rebbe Marash and the Rebbe Rashab more elaborately identify another aspect of the HaReshimu, which is that it is the Koyach HaGvul of Ein Sof that actually the Tzimtzum never affected. So you could say there's a part of the HaReshimu that you could have understood as the Koppester did, that was affected by the Tzimtzum. You could have said it that way. But once the Alter Rebbe says that the HaReshimu also is Koil HaKoil, there's another aspect of the Tzimtzum that is not affected by, another aspect of the HaReshimu that is not affected by the Tzimtzum at all. Like he put it this way, the Koyach HaGvul of Ein Sof, that was there before the Tzimtzum and was not changed after the Tzimtzum. Didn't do anything to that. The power of God to create the finite, the power of God to create the structure, which is there before the Tzimtzum, was not changed by the Tzimtzum. Didn't make it, didn't, like he says these words explicitly. Lo nischadish b'zeh davar. Nothing new happened. The Kav, the truth is the divine energy of the Kav was also there before the Tzimtzum, but the Kav did not exist before the Tzimtzum because there was no Kav. It was only Ein Sof, Bligvul, that encompassed everything. Did he have the potential to create a Kav? Yes, but the Kav represents Ohr. Whether it's Ohr HaGvul or Ohr HaBligvul, there are two opinions whether the Kav is, which one the Kav is. But either way, it's an Ohr, and the Tzimtzum absolutely impacted the Kav. That's why there had to be a Tzimtzum. And to the point that Eitz Chaim says that the Tzimtzum couldn't even leave a Kav. Eitz Chaim asked very explicitly, if there's going to be a Kav at the end, a ray of light, why don't you just conceal everything and just leave a ray of light? That's a question, Eitz Chaim. That alone tells you that the Tzimtzum is impacting the light. And the answer is because it still would be too intense and wouldn't leave room for containers. So that's why you had to completely conceal it. Then Chazer v'Heir, like he said in the top of the page, then it returns, the light returns, but now it's a different type of light. The best proof is because if the light had remained as it was before, then it would not allow for existence to be. The HaReshimu is a completely different track. The HaReshimu is not light. The HaReshimu is God's power to conceal, God's power to limit. It's a very different function. It's the root of containers, actually. And that is exactly as it was before the Tzimtzum, it's after the Tzimtzum. However, the Tzimtzum allows it to emerge. Before the Tzimtzum, it would be completely submerged. Like he said, the Ohr HaBligvul, the Koyach HaGvul was all encompassed in the Ohr HaBligvul. After the Tzimtzum, the opposite happens. Now the Koyach HaGvul of the HaReshimu has within it the Ohr Ein Sof HaBligvul. As I explained, the reason for that is because at the end of the day, there's only one Eibishter. All Bligvul includes Gvul, and all Gvul includes Bligvul. We don't. The question is from our perspective. Obviously, when we see bli gvul, you don't see the gvul. When you see the gvul, you don't see the bli gvul. It doesn't mean it's not there. So, bottom line is, it's a shift of a shift of consciousness that the Tzimtzum creates. Now, the kav is consciousness. The kav is revelation. That's equal to consciousness. The Reshimu is not consciousness. The Reshimu is the power of the divine concealed within the gvul. The koyach gvul, I should say, the power of gvul. Those oisius. So before the Tzimtzum, those oisius are radiating, and all you see is the light that's shining. After the Tzimtzum, the oisius are there, but they're in a state of what we call latent or concealed. And it has in it both aspects, like he calls the Etzem Nekudas HaReshimu is the very koyach gvul, and the Ein Sof Sheba is the concealed infinite light that's there, but it's concealed. So the letters themselves have not been impacted by the Tzimtzum. The word of the Rebbe Marash in Matzazu that he quotes, Matzazu Tafresh Mem, is these words. He says, Pu'ulas ha'esius, the Tzimtzum affected. The function of the letters, because once the light is concealed and receded, the letters don't function as expressing ideas. But the very letters themselves were not affected. Then he goes further and says that even the very letters, even the function was not affected, because the letters can still function. You just are not shining light through them. So the letters are completely intact and they're ready to function at any given moment. Nothing happened to the letters that should not allow them to function. If you said that Tzimtzum, for example, in some way caused the letters to not function anymore, that would be an effect on their function. But think of a machine that you shut down the machine, but the machine is capable of functioning. You just shut it down for whatever reason. It's not that the machine is faulty or flawed or broken in any way. So the Reshimu is essentially, I don't want to, like I said, invisible. I use the word invisible witness, impression. I mean, there's a lot of words to be used, but essentially it's the koyach gvul that is now here after the Tzimtzum. The words that he said, right? Because the very Reshimu, and that's where I read that the very Reshimu is a Helam HaOhr. That's what it is. It's God's power to conceal, God's power to limit. It doesn't, it itself is the power of Tzimtzum, the way I explained it, one of the ways that you can explain it. So therefore it's here. Obviously, until there's a kav and oir will come into play, the Reshimu will not be activated. But it's not, doesn't mean it's not active. It doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it's not revealed. And that is this two things. So therefore you have both things. You have, he said, and has the HaReshimu of a big one, but because his gab is bechinas keich gvul, because now what's dominating is the power of gvul, of the Reshimu. I'm reading 2/3 of the way down on page 1269. So it's concealed in it is the Ein Sof Bligvul. So why is it called Reshimu, he said? So the reason it's called Reshimu, if it's exactly what was there before, is because compared to Bligvul, Keich HaGvul, he says, B'chlal, Keich HaGvul, Kamei Reishim L'gab B'chinas Bligvul. Because if you put them side by side, Bligvul is infinite, Keich HaGvul is the power of finite, and that's called like a Reishim. It's essentially like an impression. Even though we're not talking about an impression of the Keich of what was there before the Tzimtzum, but if you weigh the two of them, Bligvul is like a Reishim. But in addition, we learned that Reishim also can include that it has within it all that was there even in the Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, and that's why, like he said on top of the page, that's why it's called Reishim Ma'ir HaKodim. Yeah, Mam is the way it's Lifnei Tzimtzum. So in a sense, the Reshimu is something that exists post Tzimtzum that is intact from something that was there before the Tzimtzum. It's like when scientists say that they discover some particle, and they say this particle was there at the Big Bang before it all began, or before the Big Bang, and there's a particle that remains afterwards. That would be an example for it. That's something that remained, that we have now, that we can access post-Tzimtzum from pre-Tzimtzum. The Kav is going to reveal Ohr, but it's a post-Tzimtzum Ohr, And it too is ultimately also going to connect us to pre-Tzimtzum, but has been affected by the Tzimtzum. So you don't have a real pre-Tzimtzum, a pure, pristine pre-Tzimtzum reality. Whereas here you have an entity that is pre-Tzimtzum, but obviously it's within the power of Gvul, Keich HaGvul, and it's concealed. So now we have that with our Avodah, which we're going to learn about. Through our Avodah, we can now not just expand. Remember, we talked about expanding the containers to reveal more light, but the very containers themselves are going to teach us about this pure pre-Tzimtzum reality. So both are going to be necessary to create a dir b'tachtenim, that you have the pre-Tzimtzum consciousness and a post-Tzimtzum reality, or a pre-Tzimtzum reality and a post-Tzimtzum consciousness, however you want to state it. Okay. And the final thing we learned, I'm just going to read the last lines now. Again, the bottom of page 1269 says, so you could find it at ayinbeis.com if you want to follow the actual text. So he says like this, V'kol zeh hu mipnei, I'm reading 8 lines from the bottom, 1269. Aleph Resh Samtas. V'kol zeh hu mipnei Nekudas HaReshimu lo mipnei siluk v'richa ka'er. This is clearly a very big emphasis here. I have not seen this explicitly stated in another Maimarim, even of the Rebbe Rashab. I may be wrong, it may be somewhere, but I don't recall. Definitely not before the Rebbe Rashab. So he says clearly, all this is because of the Reshimu, because the Nekudas HaReshimu. It's because of the Nekudas HaReshimu itself, not due to the Siluk V'richa Ka'er. Not because the absence of light. That's why the Reshimu is, or the Reshimu. Shimu is a Keich HaGvul, regardless of the absence of light. But the absence of light, it allows it to emerge. But it's not as a result of that. In contrast to what the Eitz Chaim said about Akudim, that the Keli that emerges in Akudim is absolutely due to the absence of light. Because there the light shines, the light then is removed, says Siluk V'richuk, allowing for the Ivies, the thickness, which was there in the light before, to develop into a Keli. So it does have something in common, because the Ivies, the thickness was there before, but you can't call it the Keich HaGvul of Ein Sof, that was not impacted by the light. Here, it is, but in Akudim, it is impacted. That's why it develops into a Keli. In the Shimu, as far as the Tzimtzum HaRishon goes, it's not impacted. And that's what he says, not due to the Richuk Silik V'richa K'er. Ki ba'er ha'nichlu b'Reshimu. It's interesting, he says, not only the Reshimu itself, but the Ohr that is encompassed in the Reshimu, lo yinoga ba'at Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum did not affect the Ohr encompassed in the Reshimu. I'm assuming Ohr nichlu b'Reshimu would mean probably both the Ohr of the Keich HaGvul and the Ohr of the Bli Gvul that's concealed within it. I'm not positive. Because when you say Ohr Nichel B'Reshimu, it's confusing a little because the Reshimu is concealed. So what kind of Ohr is there? So you have to say Ohr means it's the latent energy within it. That's how you'd have to touch Ohr here. Because if not, you can't call it a Reshim, meaning something that is an impression from the Ein Sof HaBligvul. So I think he's saying clearly here, Ein Sof HaBligvul. So we're not talking about the Keich HaGvul here. Yeah, HaReshimu Ein Sof HaBligvul Nichel b'Nekudas HaReshimu. In other words, Reshim here would mean impression, but not impression as in a lack of something. It's just that there's the Ein Sof HaBligvul is here encompassed in it. This is the Tere'er of Heisafa, and its addition, because the Tere'er has an addition from the Rebbe Marash, B'dibra Maskul Heman Echad B'Hagah. It's interesting, he says Heisafa, and then he says B'Hagah. You'd think he would write B'Tere'er, B'dibra Maskul Heman Echad B'Heisafa B'Hagah. But he's basically saying it's an addition to that Maimer. That's the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, where he says the word that the Reshimu is Koil Elas HaKoil, that Tzemach Tzedek asks, Tzarech Iyun. The tzarechim, because everywhere else it explains the kav is higher than the Reshimu, and the Rebbe Marash in his HaOhr, as I discussed now and also last class, and in the Maimer Matzah Zu Tov Resh Mem, where he elaborates on that HaOhr. That's a foot. HaOhr is a comment of the Rebbe Marash on the Tzemach Tzedek's comment on the Torah Eir that explains what means leinoga ba'at Tzimtzum, that in the Reshimu leinoga ba'at Tzimtzum. But it's interesting, if you look in the HaOhr and the Matzah Zu, there it talks that the Tzimtzum did not affect the letters, the Koyach HaGvul. The Rebbe Rashab is adding here that it also does not affect the Ohr that's concealed within that. The Ohr Ein Sof, the infinite light that's concealed within. Because you could argue, maybe it didn't affect the letters themselves, but the Ohr was affected because it's concealed. And Lifnei Tzimtzum was not concealed. But he's saying, no, also the Ohr Ein Sof is not affected. That's clearly what he's saying.
You're explaining it. How are you explaining it?
I just explained that, I thought. Okay.
No, but the Ohr Ein Sof, if you're saying that it was nothing was Tzimtzum there, not the ACS, how did it become Mechusa?
So be patient, and we're going to read
concealed.
now. So be patient, and we're going to read now, and he's going to explain it. That's what we're going to get to now. We're going to get to understanding that not only the kalim that are rooted in this place, in the Koyach HaGvul, not only are they not impacted by the Tzimtzum, but also their capacity and their connection to the deepest levels of Ohr is also not impacted. That's going to be the big Chiddush here of the Rebbe Rashab. Now, the Rebbe Marash does hint to it, because he says not just the Pu'ulas, he says not just the Oisies themselves, but also the Pu'ulas Oisies is not impacted, because they can, the Kalim, the Oisies are capable of being revealing Ohr. But the Rebbe Rashab is going to explicitly state that the Ohr itself is also intact. Let's see what he's going to say now. You're going to be quite amazed at what comes in the next few lines. This is going to be pretty powerful, and it's going to set the stage of the real transformation of the Tzimtzum itself, the Kalim themselves, not as they reveal Ohr, the Kalim themselves are going to, the Einoid are revealing godliness, as we're going to learn now. And he's going to speak about it in several levels. Let me just, before we continue reading, let me just refresh your memory about something that we learned in the previous pages. He said, if you remember, that the root of the containers is the Reshimu. The root of the Ohr is the Kav. He said that in the beginning of the paragraph, middle paragraph on 1268. Above that, we learned higher. What did we learn? The Ohr is rooted in Hispashtus Ohr. Sheirish Ohr umchinis Hispashtus Ohr. Sheirish HaKelim ma'atzmus umhus ein sof, what he called before the Etzem Ohr. So there's Hoya Hu Shmei Bulvad. Hu is Atzmus. Shmei is Etzem Ohr, the root of the containers. Prior to Alei Saratzen, prior to God arising in his will, and the 10 hidden spheres, and the Eidos are rooted in the Alei Saratzen and the 10 hidden spheres. The Tzimtzum concealed the 10 hidden spheres, diminished the 10 hidden spheres from the Kav. It concealed the Ohr Elal Kulana, and for sure the Etzem Ohr. That's what we learned there. This is all going to come back now as we go through. I'll explain all these levels again, but he's going to now discuss them. That's why I wanted to sum them up again. And if you remember, he spoke about Milo Mata, that you have in the Ohr itself, before the Tzimtzum, you have a hierarchy. He said, but that's only in Hispashtus Ohr, not in Etzem Ohr. He also said one more thing, which is important, is Hispashtus Ohr is Alei Saratzen. He's already rose in desire, and Etzem Ohr is before Alei Saratzen. And Bepratis, which would be like the difference between Ein Sof as it radiates to himself, like machshava, so to speak, thought, and Ein Sof as he's preparing and relating to another. But Pratis, he says, Etzem is a helam, even to himself it's not revealed. That's Hoyahu Shmoi. So all this is going to now come into play as we discuss how it plays itself out in the HaReshimu here. So I'm going to learn now, continue on, and we'll soon see exactly what he says here. Here goes like this. V'nimtza. Now he's concluding. V'nimtza means, from all this we conclude, we derive. Ohr of Reshimu hu mehusa shalifnei Tzimtzum. That Ohr of Reshimu, interesting, he uses the word Ohr HaReshimu, which means, of course, the Ohr concealed in the Reshimu, he says, is the hu mehusa Ohr, is the very personality of the Ohr, shalifnei Tzimtzum b'chinas primius ha'Ohr. That's coming from the inner dimension of Ohr, hainu kodim aleis haratzon. Like he said, like I just explained, before it arose in his desire to create existence. U'kamayshahu be'etzem, and how it's in the level of etzem, in the core, shalei nogabay at tzimtzum klal, where the tzimtzum did not affect or impact at all, and actually b'chinas helam b'nekudas HaReshimu. Rather, it's only in a state of concealment in this Nekudas HaReshimu. Okay, so let me explain it with an example. I already gave this example, but it's going to be very relevant now to understand really what this means. Because what does this mean exactly? Is it Ohr? Is it not Ohr? You say now it's not loinag about Tzimtzum. We discussed that Tzimtzum, wherever there's Ohr, is capable of being Tzimtzum. That's the whole point of Tzimtzum. And Ohr, Gilui and Helam. If you talk Kalim, only Helam, Helam cannot be concealed by Helam. But Ohr could be concealed by Helam. So how do you say loinag about Tzimtzum in this Ohr? What is this Pnimius and Etzem Ohr exactly? The Kav, we said, affected, the Tzimtzum affected the Chitzenius Ha'er. And the Pnimius of the Chitzenius Ha'er, which he called at the bottom of 1268, the Eira El Al Kolon. So what is going on here? So I'm going to use the two examples that I've been using again and again. One of building a home, and the second of the artist creating art. And as I said many times, it's very, very, almost impossible, at least for me, to understand the mechanics of this without finding an example that we can relate to. Because that is just memorizing words. What does it really mean? So here we are, here we go. There's an expression we say every Friday night. Seif ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. Say that. What does that mean? The end of the action arose in the beginning of the mind, in the beginning of the thought. What does that mean exactly? When you want to build a house, and let's say why? Because a person is not ein adam b'lo bayis. A person is not fulfilled without a home. Chassidus explains because the Eibishter is also that way. Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu dir b'tachten. Coming from that same place. That's a thing in Etzem HaNefesh. As soon as a child is born, they have that need for a home. However, they're not aware of it. It could be years till a person becomes aware that I want to have a home. From a point of view of children, until you're 20, 21, whatever that age, you don't think about a home, you don't think about a spouse, even though you're not complete without them. Ain't no b'lo isha either. So just because it's an Etzem HaNefesh does not mean you know about it. Then comes the day, and we learned this at length in volume 2 and Tzadik Dalet as well, all the stages, if you remember, that it begins to awaken something, and one day you wake up, and I want to have a home, or I want to have a spouse. So at that point, what we called it was called a heskim, a consideration. Then was a shakvitaria, if you remember, a deliberation. And then there's a achlota, a determination. And all this is happening within your own spirit, your own psyche. You're thinking about a home. But you know what? Even after you're aware that you want a home, doesn't mean you're building a home. It could take he said, it could take years until you actually say, okay, today is the day I'm going to begin planning a home. I'm going to hire an architect, or I'm going to go purchase a home, or whatever it is. So what do you see from this? That there's a process going on before there's even a process, so to speak. When you come to finally build a home, it takes time till you build it. You allocate resources for it because you need to have resources. Whether it's the architect, the contractor, the materials, what kind of rooms, all this is being envisioned. Then you actually start building the home. This and this day, you start building a home. Let's say it takes 5 years to build. I'm using a completely gashmistic example. The home is now finished. You move into the home. What's happening? Now that the home is finished, the last step, when it's all done, is fulfilling machshavat tchila. As Chassidus explains, machshavat tchila doesn't just mean the beginning of the thought, not just the beginning of before the whole thing happened. Machshavat tchila, the beginning of thought. It's even tchila in machshava itself, in the highest levels of your thought, even before you thought about it, consciously. So the end is like wedged in the beginning, and the beginning in the end. It's not mamish, not safe with chilosim, that's another level, but it's similar. So the end, until you don't actually live in this home and finish the home, you have not fulfilled the highest level of your Etzem nefesh. But how many steps have to happen here to get from there to here? Now they connected. So in the context of what we're learning here, you'd say like this: the home itself is what's built after the Tzimtzum. That's when the dira starts being built, the home. Before the Tzimtzum, you have all these levels. In the Etzem HaOhr, you're not even conscious of it. In Pnimis HaOhr, like he said, one level is that's l'maylam b'chinas gili gam la'atzmei. Even the Eibishter Kavyachol is not yet conscious, because consciousness is already a gili. So it's not a chson by the Eibishter. By us, you could say it's lacking. By the Eibishter, he's higher than consciousness. Then comes the state where he becomes conscious of it, gili la'atzmei. And then comes alei saratzen. This is all koydem alei saratzen, because you don't have an actual desire until you have the actual desire. It's rooted in Pnimius, but you don't have it. Alei saratzen starts now the process of actually desiring it. That will lead to the level of the Esses Spheres Sagnuzis, which is what do you desire? 10, not infinite spheres, because by Kedem Alei Saratzen, it's still spheres that are infinite, that are not even, like he says, they're all in a state of absolute infinite expanse. Now you have the 10, then you allocate resources, Shiur, Atzmei B'Koyach, and Malchus of Ein Sof, of the end of the 10 hidden spheres. That's where the Tzimtzum happens. And then you actually come, the Tzimtzum, it conceals it all. So now you can start building. The Kav is the actual building process. The HaReshimu in this muscle is all of everything that was in the mind and before you even thought about it is all encompassed, like in a sense, like a capsule in the HaReshimu. So the HaReshimu is a silent witness of all these higher levels. So even though the house is being built and the contractors are working, they may not even be aware how deep it's rooted in the Etzem HaNefesh, or in this case, Etzem HaOhr, Pnimius HaOhr, higher than any gili of the architect, in this case, God, the creator. They're not necessarily aware. They're busy with the Kav is building according to the plan, but the plan has a back end, and the HaReshimu carries that message. In a way, you could say it's like I wouldn't want to use it in the mashal here, that it's overseeing and making sure it's aligned with the kavana atzmis in the soul and the deepest level of atzmus, because obviously the kav is also coming from Elokus, and it's also coming from before the Tzimtzum. So it's definitely doing what was told, what it's told to be done, but it's the HaReshimu that actually carries the Pnimius HaKavana, and the Kav, at least externally, the external part of the Kav, is implementing that Kavana. So in the example with the artist, you could do exactly the same thing. You see a piece of art. From the art, I'm working my way backwards, from the bottom up. With the house, I went from the top down. Let's look from the bottom up. the art leads you to know there's an artist, but the artist relates to the art. There's a whole deeper, you can come to understand the art in deeper ways, which is like the Eira Elal Kulona, which is like the more than the sum total of the parts, but that's still connected to the 10 hidden spheres. Then from there you come to a point that's higher than that, the deeper kavanah. Why did the artist create this art? It could be because he had a loss in his life. It could be a big simcha. It's not something that's going to be obvious in the very art, it's in his previous. But that's the driving force to all of it, and all the way to levels that are even higher than him being an artist. So now, when you think of it this way, so what's the root of Ohr? Ohr is rooted in the process of actually creating. Even the Ohr Lifnei Tzimtzum is still relating the Ohr Aleis HaRatzon, allocating resources. The Ohr, like he says, Shayach Lazulis. It's the energy that will manifest in the Kav that's going to actually be the implementer of what kind of house God wants. But if you want the Pnimius HaKavana, you have to go to the Kelim. The Kelim carry within them concealed what God really wants, Adira B'Tachtenim, and that will only come out, that will only appear and emerge at the end of the process when the Kelim come. So in actuality, the Ohr will precede the Keli, but in Machshava, in the Pnimius, the Keli precedes the Ohr. He said earlier as well that the Keli also comes before the Ohr, where you see the Chemer Kedem, where he said Chemer Kedem Lebinyan. Like you see the Keli, it's a fetus of a child, the container, that draws the Ohr. But that doesn't contradict what I just said. It's two separate things here. So bottom line is that when Moshe Rabbeinu tells Betzalel, build a Mishkan, what does he begin with? The Kelim. He says first Oren, Menorah, Shulchan, Mizbeach. Then he tells him, build the Urias, the walls. Betzalel says to Moshe Rabbeinu, that's not the way of the world. The way of the world is first you build walls, then you build containers. First you build a house, and then you bring the furniture in the house. You don't first build furniture. Where are you going to put the furniture? First you build a house, and then you put furniture. Explains Chassidus, and Moshe says, you're right. That's why Botzel Kale, that's why you were divinely inspired. So what was Moshe's Havamina? Why does the Torah give a whole Parsha Truma, the order is Kalim, and then build the walls? Later, the order is the other way around, because the way Betzalel actually did it. So Chassidus explains, beautiful explanation, exactly what we're talking about. Because Moshe is the visionary. He's thinking about the purpose of the Mishkan. The purpose of the Mishkan is not the Urias. It's either the Adon according to the Ramban, or the Mizbeach, the Karbonis according to the Ramban. It's the Aveda in the Migdash. It's the Aveda in the Mishkan. So Moshe is speaking, Seif Maisa B'Achshav Tchila. The Seif Maisa is what rises first. First thing is the Kavanah. The Kavanah of the Mishkan is not to have a structure. Kavanah of the Mishkan is to serve God, and God should rest. Shechanti B'Seicham. The Kavanah is that he should reside, dwell among us through the Kalim. Betzalel is the architect. He's the builder. In the actual process of building, first you build walls, first you build the Ohr, and then comes the Keli. Not because the Keli is less, because that's the process of how you actually do it. That's why the Kav will be the first force that really is active after the Tzimtzum. And then the Kav will reveal the HaReshimu and will reveal the Kelim as they emerge through the process. The Ohr will reveal the power of the HaReshimu. But on the other hand, the HaReshimu carries the whole Kavanah, both the Kelim themselves, the Koyach HaGvul to create the container, and also the Kavanah in the Keli, which is Etzem and Pnimius HaOhr. So if you think of it this way, the HaReshimu was completely unaffected by the Tzimtzum. Even the Ohr Ein Sof within it, the Gilui is affected, but not the Etzem HaOhr, which is the Kavanah in the Keli, which is what? The idea that the Eibishter wants to have Adira B'Tachtenim. So it's Etzem HaOhr Kedem Gilui. Since it's Etzem and Pnimius HaOhr or Etzem HaOhr, the Tzimtzum didn't affect it. The Tzimtzum affected Ohr that's already relating to Gilui. So the Tzimtzum conceals it, diminishes it, and so on. And that's what he's saying here. It's like when we say that, when you say, there's the expression, that when you remove the Ohr from the Keli, the Keli remains like a body without a soul. But the body exists, and the body has its own Ohr, except the Ohr of a body without a neshama is a corpse, God forbid. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And because it exists, you have to say there's Keli and there's Etzem HaOhr, not Gili HaOhr. So the neshama creates Gili HaOhr. The Keli has both the Keli, the Gvul, and the Etzem HaOhr that sustains it. And that's ultimately the meaning here, that what he's saying here about what the HaReshimu has that the Kav does not have. That's the first point. We still haven't gotten to the next big punchline here that comes next. So that's the explanation of what he says here, that Nimtza Eir HaReshimu Mehusa Eir Shalifnei Tzimtzum B'chinas Pnimis Eir Kainu Koydem Alei Saratzen U'Kamoshu Be'etzem Shaloi Noga Ba'Tzimtzum Klal Actually B'chinas Helam Nekudas HaReshimu. That's the explanation of that line. But now the Rebbe Rashab is going to say a bigger chiddush. But before I read that, any questions?
I noticed that you, real quick, went back to a couple pages and you talked about the binyan of the Chomer is kodem the binyan hatzur. Well, you mentioned that something about the binyan of the Chomer, and I went back and I see it says that gam b'ishtalshus the binyan hachomer kodem the binyan hatzura the giluya or hu al yedei keli. Anyways, I'm trying to understand this in the context of what you just said. What does it mean that the construct of the material precedes the construct of the form? It seems opposite.
Look, I gave the example of a conception of a fetus. So first you have the seed fertilizes an egg, that's chaymer. And that becomes the keli for neshama that will manifest in it.
Okay.
In other words, the Etzem, the kelim are first. In Giluyim, like I said, the Kav comes first. But you see also in the Shtalshus, you'll also see chaymer sometimes before the Ohr. But for example, in Akudim, we learned the opposite. First came Ohr, then came Keli, right? Okay.
Yes.
So it all depends whether you're talking Etzem or Giluyim or. So now goes the next chiddush here. Omnom Etzem Nekudas HaReshimu. So the Rebbe Rashab now is focusing on the words Etzem Nekudas HaReshimu. Not the Ohr within it, that's concealed within it that I just described. We're talking now about something that is completely beyond Ohr altogether. Etzem itself. Look what he says here. Yesh leimer, shim b'chinas etzem ha'ohr mamish, hain b'chinas helam ha'ohr shelemayla gam b'chinas primis ha'ohr hanal. So I just spoke about it all as etzem and primis ha'ohr all as one. He's now distinguishing. The Ohrus of the Kav, comes from Chetzenius ha'ohr before the Tzimtzum and has also an element of primis of Chetzenius. Well, you know what? I should correct myself. No, the Ohr el Kolona was concealed from the Kav. But till now, he's talking about that the HaReshimu has the primis of the Chetzenius, and now primis ha'ohr that we just described, the primis ha'kavona, so to speak. But now he's saying that there's something deeper. The Etzem Nekudas HaReshimu, the very fact of the Koyach HaGvul of Ein Sof, he says, Yesh Leimer, comes from Etzem ha'ohr mamish. I'll explain what that means in a moment. Now we learned Primis Ha'ohr was also concealed, but it's still in the level of, it's still called an Ohr. It's concealed light, but it's not Etzem Mamish. So there's revealed light. That has to be concealed through the Tzimtzum. There's concealed light is the so-called, even the super consciousness that you're not even aware of, but it still relates to your innermost desire for a home, like I said. And then there's Etzem, there's no altogether any form of gili. It's complete Etzem, HaOhr, and who b'chinas, who, shalamaylim b'chinas shmai. Remember we said, Hayahu u'shmai bilvad. What's who? Who is himself, God himself. Shmai, we said before, was the root of the Reshimu. He said that clearly. He set it up on page, where was it?
You said Shmo was Ohr. You said that Reshimu.
I know what I
Etzem.
said. I know exactly what I said. Just be patient, and you'll understand in a moment. I just want to find it inside. I just saw it before. Where to go? Oh yeah, yeah. At the end of the paragraph on page 1268, so he says, "Etzem HaOhr, b'chinas hahelem shalamayim b'chinas gili gam la'atzmai, v'hu inyan hu u'shmai, k'may koich yuli atzmi." So now he says, in other words, that's the level that's relates to the Reshimu. So now he says it's the level of who, shalamayim b'chinas shmai, and we go on next page, 670, Aleph Ayin Beis. Chulu. Okay, I will read inside in a moment. We'll explain it more, but let me explain it first in simpler English here. Based on the end of the paragraph in 1268, it's clear that Hu Shmai is higher than Hispashtus HaOhr. Because he says clearly, so he says it's Hu and Shmai. It doesn't say it's Hu. Now he's saying that's the level of Hu that's higher than Shmai. So based on that, you'd say like this: Hu is Etzem HaOhr, Shmai is Pnimius HaOhr, and the Ohr after that is Katsenius HaOhr. What's the difference between them? Let me go back to the example. Who, let's start the other way around. There's the Gilui where he's aware that he wants a house. To the point that he's even thinking of how it should be built. That's what he calls the Ohr Aliyas HaRotzen, Shalom B'Retzeinei, Hashayach El Azulas. He's already thinking about what kind of house it will be, which means the 10 hidden spheres. That's already some seer. It's not actual seer as in shape and form, but it's 10, not infinite. Chachma Bina all the way to Malchus. Higher than that is the Pnimius HaOhr, what he called, where it's Gili La'atzmei. He's aware, I want a house, but he's not yet discussing or thinking about what kind of house. That's the level of Kedem Aleis HaRatzon, what he calls, where you have infinite amount of spheres. But they are all in a state of Ein Sof. You can't even talk about beginning, and that's what he called Atzmus Mahus Ein Sof, as opposed to Ein Sof. Ein Sof means it's in a level that you're capable of talking about a beginning and an end, but it has no end. The Ohr. But there was a level of Atzmus Mahus Ein Sof. That's Kedem Aleis HaRatzon. But then he said you can go deeper and say there's a level that is not even revealed to himself. Like I said, the Etzem HaNefesh, we have a desire for a home, you're not even aware of it. The same thing, Lamayla, B'chinas Gili Gam La'atzmei. And that would be the level of Etzem HaOhr, that he calls here, Helam HaOhr Shalamayla B'chinas Pnimius HaOhr. That's even higher than Pnimius HaOhr, which is at least something is connected to Ohr. There's some revelation, except it's to yourself. Where now, it's Etzem HaOhr higher than any revelation altogether. And the Reshimu, the Etzem Nekudas HaReshimu is Yesh Shleimer, is coming from that level. The Nekudas HaReshimu probably, not Etzem Nekudas HaReshimu. The Reshimu has also Pnimius HaOhr. That's also not affected by the Tzimtzum. And then the Reshimu, of course, has the koyach hagvul that we're talking about, the power to create gvul. But that power to create gvul is rooted in these deepest levels that are higher than any form of revelation. That's what he's saying now. Etzem. Now, this is far from over. The Rebbe Rashab is going to explain it in ways that I've not seen anywhere Chassidus explained ever to this extent. Usually, what we're going to learn now is usually was talked about in Sichos, like the informal talks in Torah Shalom, or other informal conversations that Rebbe Rashab would have about Chassidus. This would be discussed then. Here, he actually puts it down on paper. So many Maimarei Chassidus, like a little like Torah Shebiksav. Torah Shebiksav is the written Torah. Then Torah Shebal Peh were the things spoken informally that explain the written Torah. They were later written down as well, but they have more elaboration, like the so-called off the record, or between the lines, if you wish. So the Rebbe Rashab is now going to explain this in that fashion, like a type of explanation of these ideas, and not just leave it for us to figure out. So whatever we learn right now is just the main points. He's now going to explain it on page 1270, where we are right now. But I'm happy to stop if anybody wants to ask anything.
This level, that's highest level, that's even like subconscious, before even Gila La'atzmoy, does that indicate that that God himself, Almighty himself, has a level of subconscious? Could it be possibly that he has subconscious?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry, I didn't. There's an echo. I didn't hear it clearly.
This level that we're talking about, that is even higher than Gili La'atzmoy, which is like a subconscious level. It's before he even knows he wants the house, not even conscious of it. Is there such a level in godliness itself, not just on our
level? Absolutely. Consciousness is not a quality that God needs. By us, consciousness sounds like a very powerful level. Consciousness was created by God. Awareness was created by God. Atzmus, in its purest form, doesn't need consciousness, doesn't need awareness. It's not lacking anything. He is who he is, and that's it. Built to Mitzias Nimtza. He created consciousness. That's number one. Number two, even by us, we have many things that are super conscious we're not aware of, and yet it's fundamentally part of us. The fact that a human being needs a home or needs a spouse is embedded in us from birth and even earlier in our DNA. Just we're not aware of it. That would be an example. But in our case, by us not aware means so-called we're lacking something. But the fact of the matter is still part of who we are. With Lamaila, the whole idea of consciousness is a creation. The mere fact that the Eibishter desires to have a dir b'tachtenim, I don't want to say dictates, but that is what causes God to create consciousness. Because dir b'tachtenim means there should be experience Etzem in a world of consciousness, that we should be able to experience through consciousness that which is completely beyond consciousness.
I also don't understand. How does this mean all-knowing? I mean, God is all-knowing. You would think
that's already the level of, that's already a lower level. That's not the Atzmus.
No.
That's a level where knowing is a factor. In the world of knowing, God is all-knowing. But if you go beyond that, all-knowing, the whole idea of knowing doesn't exist. He created knowing.
Yeah, but
he created something to know.
But how do we say he was unaware of something that existed?
You don't say he's unaware.
It doesn't make any sense.
There's no need for awareness. It's not unaware. He's no need for awareness. The whole concept of awareness doesn't exist.
I have to think about that.
Wow. See, you know the famous thing, I don't know, Descartes or whatever, I think, therefore I am. Right? This is going higher than that.
Far higher than that.
Yeah, I realize that mechanically, but I just can't get my head around it.
Well, maybe because you're not God.
He doesn't need consciousness.
Did you realize you're not God at some point?
My gosh.
Yeah, I'm married. Don't worry about
it. Let me say this. We have, Chassidus gives examples of this. For example, right now, what is your left leg doing? Before I asked the question, was your left leg existent? Of course, it was doing something, but you were not aware of it. That doesn't make it less because you're not aware. Awareness is a state of gili. It's not a state of reality. That's the point.
Awareness.
As a matter of fact, I'll go a step further. When you're in the zone, and we saw this with the Rebbe, we sometimes ourselves have that. When Adam and Chava, before they ate Eitzadas, why were they not ashamed of being naked? Because they weren't self-conscious. They were complete channels, transparent channels of godliness. Why should their sexuality be different than their nose or their eyes? That's what God wants, and that's it, like a newborn child. So self-consciousness, what we think is such a big chiddush that we're conscious, is actually a yerida. It means there's a duality. There's you and the thing you're conscious of. There's the object and the subject. True seamlessness is you're just it. You don't need to be aware of it to be it. As soon as you're aware, it means there's two things going on. The thing and your awareness of it. Like we say, your hand gets wet. Does wetness get wet? There's a state of being and there's an experience. We are completely consumed with experiences. For us to have a state of being of godliness is a very difficult level because our state of being, like the famous story, I know I exist, so I wonder whether God exists. The other way around, I know God exists, I wonder whether I exist. We know we exist. We don't even question that. When you wake up in the morning, you don't need to look in the mirror to know you exist. It's just your Etzem feels that way. It's just there. I'm here. That's it. It's a given. Your existence is a given, whether you're aware of it or not aware of it. Elokus for us is bischachus. Elam is bipshitis. Elokus bischachus. The truth is the other way around. Elokus is a given, and our existence is a novelty. But just to show you how far we are from that type of consciousness. Then comes, so the first step is to be conscious of God. Then finally, it's become so much one with it that it's just the way it is. It's just reality, and that's it.
Extreme bittul. I mean, I can understand it somewhat down here. I still can't wrap my head around upstairs.
When the Russian Jews came out from Russia in 1971, 72, so the Rebbe suggested that they go visit Gedolei Yisrael. So one of them they visited was Moshe Feinstein. And the people who visited him was Motel Kazliner, and together with a guy called Mullah Shmuel Notik. There were two Russian Jews who came out, real straight transplants straight from Russian Mesiras Nefesh. So Moshe asked them, how did they make it? How could they have kept Shemer Torah mitzvahs for so many years of being oppressed, followed, tortured? It wasn't like one day. How did they make it? How could they continue to be Shemer? They're full bearded Jews, that did not compromise a thing. Complete Bali Mesiras Nefesh. How did you make it? So Motel Kazliner answered, well, we first had Yutes Kislev, we had Purim, Simchas Torah. In other words, a little L'chaim helped. That was basically how he answered. Shmuel Notik answered, he said, did we have a choice? When the Rebbe heard that, so the first answer, the Rebbe smiled. Little L'chaim numbs you a bit and keeps you transcendent. But the second answer was an answer of an atzmi. It's like, ask me, how did you continue to breathe? Well, we had a choice. We had to breathe. Torah mitzvahs was not an option. It was not, okay, I'm going to do it, and if it's difficult, we didn't have a breda. We had a choice. It's so part of who you are, it's not even a choice. It's a matter of fish and water. It's Etzem, who you are, and that's it. It's not even a matter of being conscious. It's not like I'm choosing to do it. It's like I'm breathing. When you breathe, you don't even realize you're breathing. You know that you're breathing 15, 18 times every minute? Who even thinks about it? When you start thinking about it, when, God forbid, a person is difficult to breathe, then they suddenly realize it's a miracle. Like I always say, health. What does health feel like? If someone were to tell you what health feels like, they probably need a doctor. It shouldn't feel like anything. It's not dull. It's not sharp. It's not this. It's not that. It's no sensation. You're not supposed to hear your heart beating or feel your heart beating or your breath breathing. If it's under stress or you're running or something, that's when you start feeling it. In other words, it's a seamlessness that it precedes and is higher than consciousness. This is a critical component, by the way. What's higher, the consciousness of Chachma or the super consciousness of Keser? Of course, the super consciousness. But the Eibishter wanted a bridge, an interface between super conscious and conscious. He wanted basically us to express the inexpressible. But the fact is, the inexpressible far more captures the essence than the expressible. At the end of the day, you can't express everything that's intimately within you. Some things are just not describable. You can't describe certain things. And yet, that's a dira b'tachtenim. He wants the etzem that's indescribable and inexpressible to be expressed in expressible terms that we can bridge the two. Like a nigun in a way. When you sing a song, you reach deeper. You know, I always point out this point. If someone asks you to talk about something superficial, you could talk about it all day. The weather, sports, nonsense, gossip. Look at talk radio. Hours and hours. Someone asks you to say something about something deep inside you, something more intimate about your life, we suddenly don't have many words. And not because we're ashamed or because we are vulnerable and because we don't trust someone. Even with someone you love. There's some things you sometimes say, you know, my feeling is so deep, I don't have words. So it seems counterintuitive. You'd think the things that are closest and deepest to you should be able to talk about. The things that are superficial, how many words already can you use? And yet, why? Because words are containers. And because they're containers, they only have a cup can only contain that much liquid, water. So that's why we look for metaphor. Another language like poetry, it expands the container so we can express something that's a little more sublime, less expressible. Then metaphor is not enough. Sometimes one oy vey, one laugh, one smile, one cry can capture more than entire volumes because it's so intense that words themselves are not adequate. Then goes even deeper. Even a sound can be emitted. The Zohar talks about kala deloy shtama. It's not sound that can't be heard. Like when Chana prayed and Eli saw that, the high priest saw that words, but there's no sound. This is kol demama daka. It's so subtle as this, you don't even hear a sound. And that captures more than all the sounds. Now, why? Because the more etzem, the less expression. And yet the Eibishter wanted that he wants both. He wants us to bridge the complete, inexpressible, intimate essence in what is called Giluyim, revelation. That's why you hear so often, Etzem begilui. Maybe it's time to rethink it. You know, we use it so often, we take it for granted. What does it really mean, Etzem? We say at Etzem. We say Etzem bilti mispashit. And Etzem does not extend itself, it does not express itself, it does not reveal itself. Etzem bilti misgala. And yet we talk Etzem hanefesh. I mean, we throw these words around easily, but you start thinking about it, you're getting to levels. So use Etzem. He says Etzem HaOhr. Now you could ask, why is it called Ohr? Why isn't it just called Etzem? It's a good question. The answer briefly is because the Eibishter made in Ohr itself, he wanted a bridge between Etzem and Ohr, so he made Etzem HaOhr. But the truth is, Etzem HaOhr reflects the Etzem itself. Now, the interesting twist here is that we're going to learn now is that the Kalim, even though I just said Kalim are limited, the Kalim are actually rooted in the highest levels of Etzem. And Ohr is rooted in Gilui Etzem, in the Giluyim of it. Anyway, I am not suggesting this is easy stuff to wrap your head around, but this is what we get to. I mean, when you start realizing, you start thinking about it, you realize there's no other choice. Atzmus has nothing in common with us. The idea that he needs to express himself, It means that he needs to be conscious of himself. All this is human terms. It's not atzmizdik term. Built to mitzias nimtza means he exists like no other existence. He doesn't need a reason to exist. He exists because he exists, and that's it. Mitziusim atzmuse. Nothing, but he creates himself. His mitzias comes from within himself. You know, these at this type of level of existence, we can only find examples and through Yedias Hashlila, by negating and saying, "Oh, okay, I know now what it's not." You keep saying what it's not until you start getting a sense that it's not all of that. And as soon as you give it any type of identity, you lose it. That's why Hashem says to Moshe, "No person can see me and exist and live." By not looking, you begin to experience me. In other words, you have to give up the trap of our being bound and almost held hostage by definitions. You need to come to a place beyond definitions. And the main chiddush is that God is not limited to being beyond definition. He wants the beyond definition of Etzem to come into definitions. That's the ultimate goal.
Absolutely beautiful explanation. Absolutely.
That was wow. That was amazing. Oh gosh, that's unbelievable. Rabbi Jacobson, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to say that your the mashal that you use a lot of, you say that comes in the Chassidus about that your existence doesn't mean consciousness, and one of the things is that your left leg exists even before even when you're not thinking about it, right? You're not conscious of existing. So I was thinking that maybe this is an indication that shows or proves, so to speak, that Kalim come from a higher source than the Kav. The Reshiva is higher than the Kav because health, as you said, perfect health of the body is that you don't feel it. You're not conscious of it. It just exists. That's the Kali. It just exists. You're not conscious of it. There's no consciousness there. It's seamless with its existence. Whereas consciousness, your neshama is always active. You're always thinking. You're always conscious of something. So the fact that the body exists without consciousness attached to it. So that would indicate that it's from this higher just existence level, right?
Yeah, that would be accurate. I think we're going to learn more about this to make it sense. But remember, the goal is to have a neshama biguf, to also be because the fact is we see consciousness as a value because it makes like you're aware of God. We see that as a quality. That's important as well. Because if you only had what you just described, you would not have. Look what happened. There is a nefesh abamis. There is an animal soul. We have an agenda. We are conscious of other things. That's the issue here. So we need consciousness to come to that level of what you just described of non-consciousness. Look, newborn children are what you just described. They're completely not conscious. They are who they are, and that's that.
But I was going to say that the nefesh Bahamas is tithers, and so that we have to convert and transform to godliness. Chassidus, almost the Chassidus and Elokus with Shitas. That still is dealing with consciousness, the top level. The nefesh Bahamas. When I'm not talking about pure health, you were talking about pure health of the physical, biological body. I don't think has any natiyas to averas or sitrach or any.
But you see, but look what happens. Even though we're healthy people, we start doing things that are not healthy. So you see that there is that would be beautiful. Remember, there's no purpose if we're just born healthy and stay healthy. I mean, the whole point is there is going to be a challenge. Let's put it this way, that just as much as God created, we're going the opposite. Koyach HaGvul, he also created Koyach HaBlikvul, where he did create Gilui and consciousness. That also is reality. That's also part of reality. It's just that there's a quality in we need to bridge both of them at the end of the day. That's a dira b'tachtenim. Because human beings are, at the end of the day, we become conscious beings, even though a non-conscious state is higher, but we do enter into the conscious world into the world of consciousness and Giluyim. That's what you need.
I was wondering how the part that you talk about.
That's what he says in Tanya, by the way, where Torah mitzvahs adds to the neshama. Even though the neshama is a chelik elakam emal mamish, you need Torah mitzvahs because it's not part of who you are. You're full being. We are conscious beings, no matter what. So therefore, we need to make that non-conscious state of what you call the healthy body into become something that we're also fully engaged with.
But that biological body that I'm talking about, just a healthy body, it also is born with like sugars. It likes sweetness. It has natural kind of inclinations that is hardwired. Even a baby has, likes sugar.
Okay.
But those things might not be healthy for it. And I'm just wondering if that biological consciousness, so to speak, where it has inherent and intrinsic desires on its own, the body itself, could that be the Ohr that the Rebbe here talks about the Ohr of Reshimu, that is concomitant or with the Reshimu? The Reshimu had that Ohr of Reshimu that was not touched by the Tzimtzum, not the Kav. We learned that it has both of them in it. It has the Gvul and the Gvul in it. And so I'm trying to understand that aspect, and maybe
but the goal, but that alone is not enough because you need a dira b'tachtonim, which means a dira b'goloi b'tachtonim. So all that is one piece of the story. The other piece is the kav and the giluyim that are necessary. So,
but I'm trying to understand this Ohr that the bleak bull Ohr that's with the Gvul in the Reshimu. That was throwing me off. I have trouble understanding.
It's concealed there, yeah.
So how does, if you unplug a refrigerator, an example you've used before, if you unplug a refrigerator, it still exists. It's a keli. It's a Reshimu. It's from the Reshimu, but it doesn't have any electricity in it. The electricity has receded back to the generator, whatever.
Right.
So, but you would think that the fact that it still exists would indicate that there's still an Ohr there, and maybe that's the bleak bull Ohr. Like, does it have its own, this bleak bull?
That's correct. That's true. But it's not begili, but it's not revealed. So it's a refrigerator that's just standing. It has Etzem HaOhr, no problem, but it's not revealed. And you want the refrigerator to be functioning with electricity in it, not just that it should exist. You want it to be alive.
You want it to be alive. So it's,
the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachtenim. He doesn't want a dormant, dead world that has Etzem in it. He wants it to be alive with Torah mitzvahs. He wants Hanukkah, that we illuminate our homes with the light. Doesn't just want a dead menorah that has Etzem HaOhr and it's not revealed. That's the whole point of dira b'tachtenim. The Eibishter wanted Etzem. He didn't need to create existence. He's Etzem without it. Why don't you ask a better question? He's already an Etzem without all this. So why does he need to create another Etzem?
But the question here is that refrigerator that's standing.
I'm not sure. You're going to extremes. He wants a dira b'tachtenim. The Eibishter's Etzem. Why did he create existence? For what purpose?
Okay. That's a
dira b'tachtenim. He wants to go into a world of giluyim and existence with everything. He wants the electricity to also shine, not just to have a silent refrigerator. He wants, that's what the whole point of Avodah is, to make it all come alive. That we're not Etzem and Neshama. Every Jew has Etzem and Neshama. He doesn't have to do mitzvahs to have Etzem and Neshama.
Yeah, I understand that, but my question is more specific about this refrigerator that's standing there. Is the fact that it exists.
I just answered. I'm saying, listen, respond to me. If you understand that, then I answered your question. What are you asking? That we shouldn't do Torah mitzvahs?
No, I'm asking a very deep not on the general picture of that involves how we interact with the Reshimu and how we want to motivate it or activate it. I'm talking specifically about this vessel that's existing without the energy in it. Is it existing because of the koach gvul is revealing it? That refrigerator is still existing. Something is causing it to exist. So is that coming from the koach gvul in the keli, or is that coming from that bleak gvul, or that was a remnant, an artifact from pre-Tzimtzum that it is it, as the Rabbi says, it's within all the kelim
The
itself.
answer is the koyach hagvul of the Eibishter is bli gvul too. That's the answer.
And that koach is what would give life to the group itself after the neshama leaves. Is that that existence, this physical existence is coming from just the koach gvul. It doesn't have anything to do with this bli gvul that the Rabbi Rashab
The bli gvul, the koyach hagvul is bli gvul, is the bli gvul. It carries in it the bli gvul because it's all coming from the same God. It's just not the bli gvul begilui. It's not revealed bli gvul. It's
what you just said, is that
Etzem.
the Ohr of Reshimu? What you just said, is that the Ohr of Reshimu?
Yeah, I said that a number of times. Yes.
Okay.
So that or gvul has in it that or bli gvul. That's the thing. Yeah.
The koyach hagvul.
Koach gvul.
The letters. Think of it like letters. The letters themselves contain an Etzem HaOhr within them that's not touched by the Tzimtzum. But the truth is, if you really want to understand it well, we have to learn the next page.
Okay.
But I'm going to stop here because the next page is going to be. So I'm on top of page 1270. If you read Ha'inyanhu on 1270 and Al Pizeh Yuv in the next paragraph, this page is going to be critical to help understand what we're just learning now. So it's not, I would say let's wait till this page is finished and we can then discuss this further.
Could I make an announcement about the campaign before you turn off the
So
recording?
I'm stopping here at top of page 1270. And please, Rabbi Yitzchak is going to make an announcement. Go ahead.
Thank you. So as most of you know, I'm sort of volunteered to be a team, the Ayin Beis, Friends of Ayin Beis team leader. This is for Rabbi Jacobson's organizations having a public fundraising campaign that begins tonight on Hanukkah. And we've been having a pre-campaign fundraising effort to create matching funds for the public campaign so that when people donate publicly, their gifts can be doubled. Now we got to the point where the gifts are being tripled. So, but we've done Friends of Ayin Beis, this Ayin Beis group. We are the leading team. We've raised over $36,000 when tripled, which is over $12,000 in singular donations. So far, we have about 12 donors. So that means we're averaging around $1,000 per donor. Now, people listening to this that haven't donated doesn't mean you have to give $1,000. Give $18, give $36, give $54. Think about how many classes you've learned from Rabbi Jacobson, whether it's once a week or 6 times a week. And you know, ask yourself: is an hour of learning this kind of Chassidus that changes your life, explains the whole world, is it worth $1? Think how many classes you've listened to, and then give till it hurts. Make a contribution. Now it's time for us to really make the donations. It's the Chag of lights is upon us, and Ayin Beis is about learning all about bringing light into this world and at the deepest levels. And I'm going to be calling you guys that haven't donated yet. So make my job easy. When I call you, just say, Happy Hanukkah, I just gave. And so I'll post the link again, and you can just click on it. And, it doesn't have to be a lot. Let's go for 100% participation from the Friends of Ayin Beis. You don't have to be giving a lot. So please give something. It means a lot. I know it means a lot to Rabbi Jacobson because this is our way of showing him how much we appreciate the time and effort he puts into this class and so many other classes. And with your help, we can spread this light of Chassidus, not just to the Friends of Ayin Beis, but to all of Klal Yisrael and to the whole world. There's a lot of non-Jews that the world needs light. And I know of no better organization other than Rabbi Jacobson's that is doing this on such a global level. So please give something. It doesn't have to be a lot. Let's go for 100% participation. And I'm going to post a link again. I'm going to keep hacking you each day of the days of Hanukkah. I'm going to hack you. So please give. Thank you so much. And let's express our gratitude to Rabbi Jacobson and his organization. And to those who donated, thank you very, very much. We're getting all kinds of praise from within Rabbi Jacobson's organization that this Ayin Beis group is really something special. And we know it's special, but it's nice that other people are recognizing it too. So thank you to all the donors who have made this the best team, the most successful team out there right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yitzchak. I'm a little humbled here listening to this, but I appreciate it. And it's rare to find, I have to say this, even though it may make you blush, Yitzchak, it's rare to find, when you raise money, there's always, everybody's got different challenges and resistances and so on. But it's rare to find someone like yourself that is so taking the initiative. And it's very gratifying because it doesn't happen every day. Let me put it that way. And it's not to criticize anyone. It's just the way it is. I remember, I think I shared this story. I remember when I started raising money for the organization, my organization, it was very uncomfortable for me. It's still uncomfortable, to be honest. Because, you're teaching, you counsel people, you mentor. It's a very different hat. And then I realized, I remember when I started raising, did I share this? Maybe I shared it, maybe I didn't. But if I shared it, I shared it. I'll say it again. So I remember we were sitting in a room, I'm talking about over 25 years ago. And one of the people in my class who knew the ropes, how to raise money, he said, you present your vision. I'll take care of asking people to participate, which was not forcing anyone. If you want to participate, great, So I did that. I still would cringe. It still was uncomfortable. But then a woman in the group once said to me in front of everyone, she said, you're the only person that never asked for money. That's what I always was drawn to you. Now you're becoming like all those rabbis and synagogues and organizations and so on. And everybody was sitting there and I only confirmed all my discomfort. But then I decided, she provoked me. So I said to her and to everybody, I said, something? It's a very good question. As a matter of fact, you're touching a very soft spot by me, because I actually am very uncomfortable sitting here and asking. But now that you phrased it this way, I came to realize, and I said exactly these words. I said, you've been learning how many years in my class? 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, whatever. And yes, I never asked for anything. It's true. But I started realizing maybe I'm cultivating parasites. People who only take and don't know how to give. Everybody looked at me like they were shocked. I said, I'm not criticizing anyone here, but am I really doing justice to you all by teaching? And when Moses had to build a Mishkan, a temple, he said to the Jewish people, now it's the time to give gold, silver, and copper. God could have delegated it to someone else. He was the main teacher. He brought the Torah from God, from heaven. Just like he delegated building the temple through Bezalel, he could have found a fundraiser. There were plenty of good fundraisers among the Jews, I'm sure. Yet Moshe himself, but no, when you're building a temple for God, we're all part of it. It's not like you delegate it. Moshe himself. So I'm not Moshe, but I learned from that, and I said all this, and I said, so, now there's a time you want to build it. You could say to me, you don't believe this is a temple, or you don't want to participate in building this temple. You have other temples to build. Fine, that's your right. But to say that I shouldn't be part of asking, I think would be a real injustice on my end. Anyway, just to tell you the end of the story, the next day everybody there was shy. They never heard me speak this way. And I never heard myself speak this way. I just, she pushed me. So I said that. So afterwards, the next day I got a call from this woman. She said to me, she apologized profusely. She said, I really feel terrible. You're 100% right. I'm a pretty narcissistic person. I grew up in a home with wealth, with money. My father used money as a weapon against us. We were rewarded with money and we were punished with money. So money touches all my buttons, but you're 100% right. And she committed then, I think, either $300 or $400 a month, for recurring donation for a few years. And it was a moment of an epiphany I had that I never forgot, because I grew up pretty quickly that day. It's still the challenge, but then I realized that's what it is, You believe. I heard from a shliach the other day. A shliach, he told me he grew up in a home of business people, so he never raised money for a cause. Then he became a shliach. So he was by the Rebbe in Yechidus, and the Rebbe said to him, what challenges are you facing? So he says, I'm very uncomfortable asking. I never did that. I don't want to be a schnorrer. That's the word he used, schnorrer. which is like the Yiddish word for snoring money. So the Rebbe said to him, Schnorrer? He said in Yiddish, God sends every neshama down to this earth to do chesed. The Baal Shem Tov said a neshama comes down maybe just to do one favor for a person. You're a schnorrer. You're giving them the schus to do chesed, to maybe fulfill the purpose of their existence. That's not a schnorrer. You're giving them the greatest gift. So he said it changed his whole mindset. Anyway, I'm not giving a fundraising pitch. I was touched by Yitzchok's initiative, and I just wanted to throw that out there. And obviously, it's all part of what we learn in Chassidus as well.
The Rabbi himself asked for money from people all the time at different.
Yeah. No, I'm not embarrassed. I just say it's uncomfortable. You do what you got to do. This is it. We have to build a dira b'tachtainim,
Look, this is what you have looking for, and this is a way we can give back. A lot of people in the class I hear, because I talk to people offline, it's over my head or it's difficult. I can't cup it, but I love listening. I love some of it I get, some of it I don't. This is a way you can give back on an equal level that you can feel like you're really part of it, that it really means everybody can connect with the dollar bill. And when you do that, you're elevating the money from Gashmias to Ruchnias. I can rest assured it's going to good use because you're experiencing the good use right now and in these classes. So
the Alter Rebbe says, and I don't want this to sound like a fundraising pitch here, but the Alter Rebbe does say, interestingly, that when you give tzedakah, nasa moiche the liboy zakim elef pamim kocha. When you give tzedakah, it clarifies your mind and your heart 1,000-fold. And the Rebbe says from the Tzemach Tzedek, that's not an exaggeration, that which took you to learn 1,000 hours, you can now achieve in 1 hour. So it actually helps you understand Ayin Beis, maybe.
There you go, for sure, 100%. So let's all try to, give something. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'll post the link again, and you can contribute. You can be part of this effort. And this is a really tangible way to be part of this Ayin Beis effort, to be part of the spreading of Chassidus and Rabbi Jacobson's teachings, and enable him to touch more people. This is how we build a dira. This is how we improve the world. We have to each of us in our own way, but do something, even $1, give something, and I promise you'll feel better, and the blessings will come, as Rabbi said, 1,000-fold.
Okay.
Maybe may I correct you a second, Tzvi Lang? You said the Rebbe asked for money. Rabbi Jacobson correct me. I don't remember ever the Rebbe asking for money. The Rebbe made a market for bring, and basically he gave us little people a chance to join in the Rebbe's work. That's not called asking for money. It's just the opposite, giving us opportunity to take part in it. And I think this campaign is the same way. Rabbi Jacobson, as a friend, I could tell you, I don't think you need our money, but you're giving us a chance to take part in the beautiful work that you do, and I applaud you for that. And it's like you mentioned, you give, you're going to get more. And we just saw last night one of our young philanthropists in the neighborhood who gave $1 million and said, clear, this is what brings them the unbelievable success. So we have an example who to learn from.
The truth is, the Rebbe did write letters that did ask for money as well at times, like when, for publications and so on. But the point is well taken. It was not about asking, it was about giving the opportunity. Yeah. Okay. Maybe tzedakah is more like the HaReshimu that's higher than HaOhr. Maybe that's how you understand the HaReshimu. Make the kelim. Just thought of that.
To be continued.
Okay, my friends. So we are concluding here on top of page 1270. Tomorrow we'll continue. So we'll continue the class everyone have a very happy Hanukkah. And